to be asked to speak. I'll just get some water. This is actually the third Sydney University Law School that I've been in. When I started, it was down in it was an old rundown building in Phillip Street, where at one stage you couldn't go between the third and the fourth floor, I don't think, because the stairs well was broken. So you relied on the lifts, which were often out. And we used to also have lectures, I remember in legal history, they called the Macquarie Auditorium, which was run by a radio station 2GB, which is the top rating AM station in Sydney. They used to make programs there, such as, you know, comedies and things like that. And when I was younger, I used to go there and watch the comedies being made, but I remember going to sleep often during legal history lessons because the seats were like a picture theatre seat. You know, half the lecture theatre would be asleep. So I wasn't a great student of legal history, unfortunately. John Graz, Secretary General of the International Religious Liberty Association, our kind host Patrick Parkinson, Professor of Law, delegates and friends, thank you for inviting me to address the International Religious Liberty Association's 13th meeting of experts. I must say I was a bit awed by the whole thought of having to speak to all these experts on religious liberty, because I don't claim to be an expert at all on it, although I'm sometimes affected by prejudices like other people, and so I understand the importance of safeguarding religious liberty. The Association is addressing the broad theme of the challenges of secularism to religious freedom. The discussion has been in an international context, with the panel of experts from a variety of countries offering insights into religious freedom issues, not only here in Australia but also in the United States and Europe. And I gather this is your 13th international meeting of experts. When looking at religious freedom around the world, it's indeed a topic of high importance for the international community. The recent report by the United States Commission on International Freedom paints a troubling picture of religious freedom across the globe. The report describes the critical situation of millions of people who are suffering persecution, in many cases violent persecution, oftentimes sponsored by the state or government bodies in countries, among many others, such as Burma, North Korea, Egypt, Eritrea, Iran, Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, China, Saudi Arabia, Sudan and Vietnam. For example, it describes the situation for religious minorities in Iraq, which includes Christians, Yazidis, Mandaeans, Jews and Baha'is. Quote, since 2004, members of these minorities have been kidnapped, raped, tortured, beheaded and evicted from their homes. Christians have seen their churches repeatedly bombed. The worst single attack against Christians was launched on October the 31st, 2010, during a Sunday Mass. An Al-Qaeda affiliate assaulted Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church in Baghdad, killing or wounding nearly all of the more than 100 worshippers inside. Wijdan McMichael, then Iraq's human rights minister and a Christian, said that the goal of the perpetrators was to empty Iraq of Christians. Since 2004, there's been a mass exodus of Christians from Iraq, reducing its Christian community by more than half. Significant declines also have occurred among smaller religious minorities, such as the Yazidis and also the Mandaeans, who have lost more than 80% of their members, mostly through immigration. These troubling situations require the serious and concerted efforts of the entire international community to work constructively and effectively in addressing the specific problems experienced in these countries and building religious freedom around the world. They also offer a context for the topic which I'm invited to address today: religious vilification, anti-discrimination law and religious freedom. Firstly, the situation in those countries make me grateful to live in a country which experiences a high degree of freedom, including religious freedom. Secondly, and flowing from that attitude of gratitude, is the reminder that we must ever cherish the freedoms that we enjoy by ensuring that in an ever-changing society those freedoms are not diminished or lost. To borrow a phrase, the price of liberty, or freedom, is eternal vigilance. I don't know whether that can be attributed to J. Edgar Hoover or whoever, but that's who told. I had a quote from him saying that, and I just thought, well, maybe not everyone thought that he was the epitome of that philosophy. Secondly, and flowing from that attitude of gratitude, is the reminder that we must ever cherish the freedoms that we enjoy. Oh, sorry, I've already read that. In addressing the topic of religious freedom, I'll explore religious freedom under Australian law in its proper historical context. For as Winston Churchill said, the longer you can look back, the further you can look forward. I will then discuss challenges to religious freedom in Australia, and then some aspects of religious vilification and anti-discrimination laws in New South Wales and other states of Australia. Freedom as a core Australian characteristic is not new in Australian history. The Australian national anthem begins with the words, "Australians all, let us rejoice, for we are young and free." This song became the national anthem in 1984, but it was first performed in Sydney in 1878. The Australian Constitution, adopted in 1901, was drafted following a series of democratic constitutional conventions in the 1890s, which were made up of largely of elected representatives from colonial parliaments who put draft proposals to popular votes of the people in each of Australia's colonies. But around that time, the colonies began to grant women the right to vote, with all women having the right to vote for the Commonwealth Parliament from near the beginning of our federation. Consistent with this Australian version of freedom, the Australian Constitution did not follow major political upheaval. In that sense, its adoption was very different to the adoption of the US Constitution. That the Premier was referring to decisions of the United States Supreme Court, such as Engel and Vitale, where it was a 1962 decision, where the court determined it unconstitutional for state officials to compose an official school prayer and require its recitation in public schools. This was notwithstanding the fact that prayer was non-denominational and students were permitted to excuse themselves from participation. The prayer in question read, "Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen." Nothing wrong with that. In that decision, the majority of 6 judges referred to the wall of separation between church and state. And although the US Supreme Court now applies the Lemon test, the name derived from the US Supreme Court of Lemon and Kurtzman, a 1971 decision, which gave permission for the US government to fund the salaries of teachers in religious schools, which is a more flexible test than the rule expressed in Engel and Vitale, the wall of separation doctrine appears to still have a strong hold in US legal jurisprudence. The second conclusion to be drawn about Section 116 from the High Court decisions is that the free exercise of religion is not an unbounded right. In much the same way that freedom of speech is not unlimited and is subject to laws such as defamation, libel laws prohibiting the publication of terrorist material and restriction from publication of material that is obscene under the National Classification Scheme, the free exercise of religion is not unlimited. The main limitation cited by the Boycotts, Divestment and Sanctions Resolution against Jewish businesses passed in December 2010 by the Marrickville Council. Marrickville Council is part of Sydney in the inner west, and more recently violent activist protests against Jewish businesses, in particular Max Brenner chocolate and coffee stores, and one in Melbourne is particularly the subject of such attack, are eerily reminiscent of Jewish pogroms of earlier times. The Marrickville Council resolution was championed by Greens Mayor and Greens state election candidate Fiona Byrne and supported by Lee Rhiannon, now a federal senator for the Greens. Their support for this action revealed an ugly underbelly of the Australian Greens agenda. Fortunately, elected representatives from Australia's mainstream parties have shown strong solidarity with the Jewish community. Premier Barry O'Farrell wrote to the Council giving it 28 days to rescind the resolution. Within a week, the Council announced that it withdrew the resolution because he had the power to direct the winding up of the Council. It's a fate that councils don't like to have done to them. In response to protests against Max Brenner, which resulted in 19 charges for offences against trespassing and besetting premises and assaulting police, Foreign Minister and former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd visited a store in Melbourne where he said, "I don't think in 21st century Australia there is a place for the attempted boycott of a Jewish business. I thought we had learned that from history." During the 2007 parliamentary debate on human cloning in New South Wales, the Catholic Archbishop of Sydney, Cardinal George Pell, was investigated by the New South Wales Upper House's Privileges Committee for public comments to the effect that Catholic MPs who vote in favour of human cloning would be acting contrary to their church's teaching about the sanctity and dignity of human life. And although his words were that they should reflect in their conscience on their position, some media said that he was threatening to deny Holy Communion, an allegation he denied. According to the investigation, he was to be investigated for contempt of Parliament. At the time, Lee Rhiannon, who was then a member of the New South Wales Legislative Council of the Greens, said in her media release, "The President of the Upper House has agreed to my request that the Privilege Committee investigate the appropriateness of Cardinal Pell's comments." Ms Rhiannon then made it clear that her intention was to intimidate Cardinal Pell into silence in the human cloning debate, saying, "Hopefully this referral will act as a warning to Cardinal Pell that he should refrain from launching a fresh assault on Upper House MPs who are yet to cast a vote on this important bill." In response to the inquiry, Cardinal Pell argued, "It's my submission that it is essential that religious leaders, including myself, are free to express the position taken by their church or religion on matters of public interest and debate. To prevent religious leaders from doing so has the effect of stifling religious freedom and hampers effective and open debate on matters of public interest." Ultimately, the committee cleared Cardinal Pell of any contempt and thanked him for his cooperation. It did so after considering the nature of contempt, citing examples of situations where MPs had been directed to vote in a particular manner by their party or trade union with the sanction of disendorsement if they failed to vote as directed. In some cases, they were in fact disendorsed. In fact, the former President of the Upper House was suspended from the ALP for over 6 months because she broke the caucus vote on a censorship matter and voted with the Greens. The committee also made reference to a similar action taken by the Speaker of the Western Australian Legislative Assembly, who issued a warning letter to the Perth Catholic Archbishop Barry Hickey. The Archbishop made similar statements to those of Cardinal Pell concerning Catholic members of Parliament who chose to vote in favour of Human Reproductive Technology Bill 2007.
Would it not be likely to say that the Greens, like other political parties, contain a wide range of religious views?
Look, I know there are Christians who are members of the Green Party. they're entitled to join whatever party they like. I think they should carefully examine the policies and practices of the Greens and the statements of their leaders and their agenda, if I might put it. It's certainly an agenda that has been declared by archbishops before recent elections as being one hostile to Christian sentiment, but there are always exceptions. But I haven't heard those Christians in the Greens condemning Lee Rhiannon, condemning the Marrickville Council over what appear to be anti-Jewish practice in relation to what happened at Marrickville Council and what's happening down in Victoria at the moment.
Thank you. There's time for one last question, gentleman.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, your basic thesis is that